Well, welcome back to the Extraordinary Drummer Show. I'm your host, as you know, Sharon Moore. Today, my guest, oh man, I'm just even just laying eyes on him in front of me. It's like I'm cool. I can close the show up now, yeah. He's a legend, man. We all come from him. We all still trying to figure out what the heck he was doing on those drums. Some of his credits includes, as you know, the Headhunters with Herbie Hancock, John Schofield, even a change, Tony Bennett, Wayne Shorter, who we're going to talk about later. Will you help me welcome my guest today, the man, Mike Clark. Hey, Mike.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me. It means a lot to me. And I actually only played one time with John Schofield, but I threw it on the resume. It looks good. The rest of those
Hey,
cats I hit with pretty good, you
I
know.
would have threw it on there too, man. How you
Yeah,
doing, man?
oh, yeah, damn right.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing good, really good, especially seeing that I just came off of a double, I don't know if you want to call it surgery or procedure. I had kidney stones, which is painful enough. But then it got complicated and I had to go back and have them remove them. And then I had one stint in each kidney for a month, which is extremely painful. I mean, it's ain't no joke. And then the oxycodone. I don't really want to be that wasted all the time. Once in a while is okay. You know what I mean? Like for my age, but every day for a month, no, I couldn't get anything done. But I'm good now. I'm back.
I read somewhere where you started playing drums when you was 4 years old. Your father was very impressionable to you.
Yes, sir. We always had a drum set in the house. My father was a jazz drummer and not very good one. So he quit at 19 or 20, but he was a big collector of records and he kept the drum set. And so I guess when I was too young to talk or walk, because he's a real party guy, so he had his buddies over all the time playing records, and they would have me in the bassinet, and he'd put me down there, or so the story goes. I don't remember this, but down by the record player, and I guess my brain absorbed all that boogie woogie and stuff that he was listening to. And then when I walked over to the drums, I immediately played like a Gene Krupa tom tom thing, and it all worked and it all made sense. And he was like, "What?" And then that night, he took me to a nightclub where his buddies were playing, and I sat in with the band. And that's how the whole thing kicked off right then and there.
I saw somewhere where some of your early influences were Hal Jackson and Clyde Stubblefield and those guys, and Sonny Freeman and those guys. How so, and what did you glean from them?
Well, okay. So I'm a jazz guy the whole time. And by the time I'm in high school, I'm trying to play like Max. I'm deep into Max. Okay, so because I had good chops from the jazz thing, when I heard James Brown, now my girlfriends are liking James Brown, see? And I'm like, well, and I'm liking him too. I'm like, damn, this is almost like a jazz band. I'm loving the drummer, James Brown live at the Apollo 1. And I'd heard him before with Please Please, and he had another hit out, Money, and another one, Good Lovin', you can make you feel so bad. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
way back,
I know that.
1958. So I remember him from when I was in junior high, but he hadn't blown up yet. And then, because I was listening to soul music all the time too, little Richard Lloyd Price, whoever was there. That was my other Jones, because they had horns and it was almost like jazz, right? You know what I mean? So I loved it.
Hmm.
So um, I could immediately play Cold Sweat, and I could play the whole Live Apollo at the album, Live at the Apollo 1. I played with it at home, and I could do the beats right away because I had jazz chops, and I'm like, that ain't that hard to do. I don't think I had the feel right, but the beats I could play right away. So most of the jazz drummers who were older than me that I was already sharing gigs with, they could play the Horace Silver Boogaloo kind of funk and Cannonball, um, but but they couldn't play the James Brown stuff. They didn't get it. It wasn't their generation, and it was right in smack in my high school years and junior high. So I was prepared already. So I got a million gigs playing and this stuff, and I found out the drummer's name was Clayton Filiop. And he's the guy on Live at the Man, this dude could play, bro. These were all obviously jazz drummers playing funk, so I liked him. And then I got into bands that were playing that stuff. And so I got a reputation for doing that. And you made more money doing that than you did play jazz. You could work 5 nights a week. So my senior year in high school, I'm making $200 a week, man. I bought a brand new Chevy, new, bro.
Ooh.
More on the floor, big engine, all that. And I'm like, and my mother, and now dig this, my mother, I can understand my father doing this, but my mother was like, don't, I was going to go to a junior college and they were going to help me with the tuition, which wasn't much anyway in those days, but because I play with the big band, see, they offered me a little deal. My mother says, don't go to school, Mike. You're making more money than me and my husband. I had a stepfather at that point. Typical, I hated his guts, but he was good to her. Like we only punched it out once.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But then, uh, um, uh, what happened then? She was like, "Man, you're making 200 and sometimes 250 a week," and the gigs were endless. They lasted for years, and I became pretty good at the funk thing. And then because I was a jazz guy, though, I was still playing jazz every chance I got. Like I would sneak out of the funk gigs and get a sub to play jazz. Everybody knew that was my Jones. So then I started developing the beats because of my jazz thing. I got bored playing just regular. I'm like, well, it's been 3 or 4 years now, and I'm making a good taste, but man, let me start screwing around and see if anybody gets pissed. So I'm like, yeah, that'll work. And I made up a million of these, and nobody ever said a word about it. They never said anything. And then I got on an organ gig in Oakland with a guy named Jimmy Ed, a badass organ player. Oops. And he said, and we play Mercy Mercy every night, which I love still to this day. And I started dividing the hi-hat and the snare and the bass drum all over the place. And not only was he cool with it, but the people in the club liked it. They were like, man, we can dance to that. So instead of being I'd be like, I started that. So, and I'd heard Clyde doing something like that. And where I actually got it is I did a whole blues run down in Texas. I'll get into that later if we go back and revisit that. But there I met my hero and mentor, a guy named Ray Torres, who was a genius. He was like the Elvin of funk, and he'd never even heard Elvin. And he didn't play any triplets. He had his own thing, but he was all over the bar and broken hi-hat. And I'm like, wow. So he kind of trained me. I was already headed there, but then he went, well, wait a minute, let me show you some stuff. And he really showed me years worth of stuff. And they called him Good Rockin' Ray. He's the funkiest drummer I've ever heard in my life, bar none. That means all of them. And that was the guy so then I just took some of the things he showed, more than some of the things he showed me, and I made up kind of my own like vibe, which I became popular in Oakland and for doing that. And then when Paul got the gig with Herbie Hancock, Paul Jackson, and Harvey made the record. And I wasn't really interested in anybody would die to play with Herbie Hancock, but I was really doing good as a jazz drummer. I was playing with Bobby Hutcherson, Woody Shaw, Vince Guaraldi. I had it going on, bro. And I was the only guy on the West Coast, in the Bay Area anyway, that could play the East Coast style. The East Coast thing was perfect for how I hear it. I had that kind of fire at that time, and I wasn't laid back like a lot of those West Coast dudes, And so I had a serious edge, and I was mad at the world, the whole nine. Anyway, so that kind of stuff. So when Herbie heard me, Paul said, come and play with me and Herbie. Actually, that's not quite the way it happened. Paul was a social dad about, and we lived together. We had this crib in Oakland where the hang was on, and he was always gone. So Hancock would call over there to talk to him, and I would answer the phone. He didn't know who I was, but we'd have these hour-long conversations about Muhammad Ali, like political stuff, Huey Newton, like whatever. You know what I mean? Miles and Tony, poor guy, I made him talk about Tony all the time. Must have made him crazy. And finally, the guy calls over there one day, and I said, Paul's not here. And he goes, like, I called to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, I figure he wants to just BS. And he goes, Paul tells me you have some weird kind of funky thing that you do. And I went, well, maybe a lot of people say that. I'm not sure. He goes, are you that white dude that played over with the both hand with Woody Shaw? And I went, yeah. And he goes like, well, why don't you gather? Can you find Paul? And I'm like, now that may be a challenge. You know what I mean? This dude, man, are you kidding? But he said, try to round up Paul and come over and play with me at this address tomorrow. So I put an APB out for Paul. I called his dad, his sister, all his friends, everybody. He came by. Okay, he says, Paul says, I'll pick you up. So we went over there and played with Herbie. And I tried to play kind of like Tony and Elvin. And he goes, He goes, we're not doing that. He goes like, and I had a little 18-inch jazz set with 2 Ks way up high like everybody did in those days. And he's like, we're not playing that kind of thing. And he goes like, and if I wanted to do that, I'd just call Tony. He's one of my dear friends. I'm like, oh, God. So anyway, like, oh, wow. So he says, put a pillow up against the bass drum and deaden the sound. And play that, whatever that funky thing I'm hearing about that you do. I want to hear it right now. And I'm like, okay. So I did, and he hired me. And when the way he hired, we didn't even finish the thing. Halfway through, he goes, that's it. He goes, I'll see you in Chicago on Monday. And I'm like, huh? And like, he was like Darth Vader. He had a long black coat on with a button on each side and it went all the way down to the floor and he got up and he left. And I'm like, now Paul, him and I are bros. So I'm like, does that mean I got the gig? And Paul's like, I don't know. And so we go home and this guy calls who's Herbie Hancock's road manager and says, I have your tickets for Chicago. You're leaving on Sunday and we open at the something club on Monday. And I'm like, damn, I got the damn gig.
Tell me about how did the actual proof session come about? And what the heck was you thinking on that record, man?
Well, that was the stuff that Paul and I, as far as the rhythm goes, that was the stuff that Paul and I had been doing for years before we met Herbie. We had our own band, a couple of our own bands that played that kind of rhythm. That's what we did.
And you did that, you did actual proof in one take?
Yep. I did. Listen, man, I'm better at that kind of drumming than I am regular drumming. I could do that all day.
Were you reading that or was that by ear?
Intuition.
Oh, man. What? Everybody thinks you had charts on that.
Hell no. Herbie never wrote anything for us, but he would find out your skill and write a piece that featured your skill or where he knew you could adapt easily. But I never saw any, I can read. I never saw any written music with Hancock, man. It was just like you go in and actual proof was the easiest one of those tunes for me to play because it was just, you could just like play like Elvin. You could just play. Okay, I dig. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, I know where that is now. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, I got that one too. All right. And it was like that. It wasn't like bar number 17 is on the hit is on the E of, nah. And especially with Paul Jackson, Paul can read and write and arrange, but he never thinks like that. He's completely funk. Even when he plays jazz, it's all feel and grit, all, but intellectual.
Mike, you was getting ready to you was thinking of going back off. I see the drum kit behind you. You was thinking about going back there and breaking down some of that stuff for us.
I was, yeah.
Are you able to?
Well, I don't know how good it's going to sound, but I'll give it a shot.
Okay. Would you break down actual proof a little bit for us?
Well, it's been about 45 years, but it's something like this. I can kind of do it.
Thank you, Mike. Come on back up.
Anyway.
That was great, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so do I. That was fun. Thanks for making me play. Well, I mean, I haven't played all day, and I just realized, oh yeah, this is what I do. I forgot. I've been like laid up for a month, and then this COVID thing. I'm doing a lot of online teaching and some clinics and some stuff in Japan, and I mean, it all goes down in the room here.
Yeah. Hey, let me throw a couple of, speaking of some of the people you played with and you met, let me throw you a couple of names at you and you tell me what comes to mind. I've heard some great stories.
Okay.
Meeting Miles Davis for the first time.
Well, a lot of people know this story, but there's two stories. All right. Here's one. I go into Herbie Hancock's dressing room, and I don't know Miles Davis is going to be there. And I haven't even thought about him in a lot, except for the records and how great he is. But nobody told me he's going to be in like Cleveland or somewhere. So and I have this beautiful sister with me. She's absolutely divine. She's got the Coke bottle shape. She's got the jean cap on. She's got the turquoise stuff. And she doesn't really know anything about jazz. She doesn't know who Miles Davis is or anything. And I got her on my arm. She's fine, bro. I mean, she's killing. She's gorgeous. Anyway, so I opened the door real fast to Herbie's dressing room because I'm going to attack him, maybe wrestle with him or tease him, or we were all young, and so we were all playful. You stuff like that. You get the guy, put him in a lock or some kind of crazy stuff like that. Anyway, so I'm going to go in his room and do that, and I open the door real fast. She's with me, and and Miles Davis is sitting on the couch, and he's got a wide brim on down like this, and he's like. Yeah, he's got his cigarette and shit, and he's got. Oops, I'm swearing. He's got a leather pouch around him with fringe all over it. He looks like how you think Miles Davis would look, right? He's got all that going on. And he's just kind of looking at me and her with a cigarette in front of his face like this. And he seemed to have long, skinny fingers, if I remember correctly. And he had rings on and all kind of stuff. So, and then Herbie can talk so hip. Sometimes he can talk so hip, it's almost too hip. And then it's so hip that it's like, wow, I mean, he's adding an extra lot he's putting a lot on that stuff. Or sometimes he's a college guy, so sometimes he can talk real collegiate and square. He's got several personalities, right? Depending on what, and he's real natural about it. So he gives me this terrible introduction. He goes, and he comes out of the square bag. He goes, Miles, this is my drummer, Mike Clark, and his lovely lady, B. Her name was B. And the way he said it, I went, oh, God. Like, even Miles was like, and so he looks at her. He's like, and then he looks at me. Then he goes like, he takes a big pull off. This real dramatic stuff, He takes a hit off cigarette and he goes, shit. It was a classic. And later I told Herbie, thanks for that great intro, brother.
Let me throw another name at you. Meeting for the first time. Chick Corea.
Okay, I don't really know him, but I have interacted with Chick. And I have a story, naturally. I guess I have a story about everything. Lenny White calls me and he says, Chick, now this is about 5 years ago. Chick never heard actual proof because he didn't want to listen to anybody but what they were doing. He didn't want to be influenced by anybody, or so the story goes. He told me that himself. And Lenny is a dear friend. Me and Lenny go back to 1970. We just got off the phone a little while ago about we're watching like 3 or 4 series together. We're watching Fargo, Lovecraft, a bunch of stuff, Anyway, so Raised by Wolves, all this stuff. Okay, so anyway, he says, man, Chick wants to meet you. He just heard actual proof and he's freaking out. He loves it. So he wants us to both come down to the Blue Note. So we go down to the Blue Note and Weckel's playing and everything is cool. They play a great show. Weckel was playing his butt off, and so I meet Chick, and he has me into his dressing room, and he just talks about actual proof. Man, you sound like Roy and Elvin and Tony, but yet you're funky. It's like, wow, like he goes, that stuff is modern today. If you recorded that this afternoon, it would be modern. And he goes, when are you coming out to LA? I want to play with you. And I go, as a matter of fact, I'm going out there in 2 weeks. He goes like, well, here's uh, uh, my number. Here's my office, my manager, somebody. Call this guy with a couple of days and we'll set it up. All right. So I'm like, wow. So I'm going out to LA and I call the manager and he says, okay. And we arranged for me to go out to Mad Hatter and play with Chick. Now Lenny and Stanley are there doing Return to Forever, so they're rehearsing. So Lenny's like, you can use my drums and we can hang out afterwards. And all. I'm like, okay, cool. So I get to the hotel in LA and I'm out there on another gig. Me and Michael Wolf had a band together at that time and we were doing quite a bit of stuff. And we're out there playing, I forget the name of the place, I can't remember. But it's not Catalina's, but another one. And so what was I saying? Okay, so I'm calling all my buddies and saying, hey man, well, my friends are calling me, I'm calling them, what are you doing today? And I'm like, well, as a matter of fact, man, I'm going out to Chick Corea's place today and play with them. I'm bragging. They're like, no, what? Nah. And I'm like, yep. And I'm like, Lenny's out there, I'm going to use his stuff. Hey, it's all good. Cool. So I go out there and Chick and Gail, his wife, have this beautiful lunch for just me and them. And they're asking me all these questions about Herbie and it's delightful. So then we go upstairs and I'm thinking, well, there's no bass player. So I guess Chick will play left-handed bass or we'll just duo up. I don't care. Chick Corea, man, it's cool with me. So all of a sudden we go up there and one of his roadies in the studio wheels in another drum set and he sits down and he goes like, okay, Elvin, I'll go first. And he starts trying to play his Elvin thing, kind of like Elvin. And I'm like, huh? He goes, all right, you go. And I'm like, all right. So I play some fake Elvin, my version of Elvin Jones, which nobody's Elvin Jones, but okay, I got a little bit of his stuff. Tony, same thing. We do Tony, Philly Joe, Roy, for days and all. We're both of us. And then he goes, oh man, thanks, Mike. That was great. Well, I got to get back to work rehearsing with these guys. I'll catch you later. And then I go, so now I'm in a limo going back to the hotel. And I'm like, what? Excuse me? So when I get to the hotel, my phone is blowing up. Hey, what was it like? Did you play with Chick? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. Kind of. And then I told Lenny laughed. He was dying. I'm like, what? But anyway, it makes for a great story. I'm certainly not going to play in Return to Forever or any of the fusion stuff, but I'd have made a good jazz drummer for Chick, man. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. We would love to hear that. I once read somewhere where you said you don't like playing, was it funk or straight time because there's not enough conversation there? What was it that you said, and what is that?
That's pretty much it. I've gotten older, so I don't feel as much that way now. Now I'm cool with it. But I played so many funk gigs to earn a living and that's fine. If there's a singer there, like a real soul singer, somebody who can shout and scream and holler, and the band is good, I'll play straight time. Nobody has to even ask me. Of course, not a problem. Whatever's necessary, whatever's appropriate. But if I'm there with a bunch of jazz musicians and they want me to hold it down while they go crazy, nah. Now I will do it, but then somebody's got to pay me a nice taste because that's boring, man. It's like a basketball team. Here's a guy doing half court shots, hook shots, layups, and then I'm over there dribbling, for the entire time so he can go get down. I don't think so. That's not how I do it. You got to pay me to do that, and then I'll do it. And you got to ask me to do it, or I probably won't think to do that. But if you you're playing some regular James Brown or whatever the update on that is now, then yeah, of course I'll play time. That's not a problem. But it's got to be real, man. I don't want to pack anybody up. You kidding? That's like the Wayne Newton show or something. I'm going to be back there just tipping. This guy's going to get all the love. No.
The Wayne Newton show. Da, da,
That's
da,
how
da,
I
da,
feel
da.
about that. Like I play with Maceo now. For a guy like that's funky, well then sure, not a problem. But these cats that want to get up and play like Coltrane, they want me to hold it down. Nah, nah. I'm gonna play too.
Let me ask you this one. Mike, what do you think of as you take a sip there? What do you think of drum machines and today's music with drum machines and all of that? What do you think?
I'm about as interested in drum machines as I am Donald Trump.
Oh boy, we're not going down that road, Mike.
All right, sorry. No, I don't care nothing about no drum machine. I like live drummers, and I'm not a jealous of other drummers. I love drummers. They're my bros, and I do like a lot of the hip hop stuff, and I like a lot of the stuff. I don't hate listening to those things with drum machines. If I hear a good hook, and the rap is interesting, and it's funky, yeah, I'm fine. But as far as talking about a machine doing a human's work, there's a lot of great people out of work because of that. No, I'm not feeling that. That's what I mean.
Are you doing any endorsements?
Yeah, DW,
Hmm.
drums, of course. Istanbul cymbals. Uh, Lenny got me. I was with Peisty, and Lenny's like, "Come over and play this cymbal. It's you." And I went over and I played it. He goes, I want you to have it, but I want you to come with this company." And I went, I got to have that symbol, so I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? So I went with Istanbul, and excuse me, I got many great symbols, man. I mean, real good symbols. Like nasty, funky, earthy sounding stuff. It's not that polyester ping. This stuff is made for the streets, man, if you will. you know, I
What are
mean,
you doing? Sticks and drum heads.
innovative percussion drumsticks, Evans heads drums, and that's the only endorsements I have.
We have a thing on the show we call Word of Advice, where we ask the guests, the drummers, if they will leave a parting word of advice for the up and coming drummers. They will leave an advice for some of the guys are already at the next level, but the
Sure,
young guys are trying to get traction in this industry, in this game. Would you leave them a few words of advice?
I would. I'd be glad to. Let me see if I can say the right stuff here that I believe in. All right, first of all, respect everybody. Don't be a drag. Even if you get a real good gig, or even if you have a whole lot of chops and you got the latest grooves and you're bad and you think you're bad, be nice to everybody because as life goes on, people remember, you know. And the other thing is play with as many humans as you can. It's great to go into the shed and practice for hours and hours. I did it too. I still do it. But the real lesson is playing with other people. That's where you hone your skill and learn how to really get your groove on, no matter what kind of music you play. I don't care what it is, jazz, funk, whatever, hip hop, anything. That's where you get it together. Because if you can play real fast and you have all the latest everything going on, that's important. I have some chops, sure, but if you go in loaded for bear and you start playing all that stuff, it may not fit the music or the musician. So you have to really know what you're doing, and it takes. And the best way to find out how effective your stuff is the effect that it has on people. If you can affect people and make them feel good, then you're going to work, man. You know.
Legacy. What's that word mean, and how would you like yours to be played out when they talk later on?
Well, legacy without me in the picture is a huge. Look what Elvin left for us.
No, no. Say that again.
Look what Elvin left for us. That Tony, Clyde, Jabbo. Look what they left. God, I mean, now that's some legacy. Uh, for me personally, I would be like to thought of as a guy that made a contribution and had a positive impact on people. Um, and I think and who had his own voice. I never tried to follow the pack, or I never tried to be current or new, or well, I tried to be hip. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie about that. You know, what is hip? But I didn't want to. I didn't want to be just a regular guy. I wanted to have my own sound and my own ideas. I didn't want to play everybody else's ideas. I took everything I loved from everybody else and then kind of put my thing on it and then went on from there. So I like to be a positive impact on people, made a contribution, didn't take from, um, and had his own voice, unique voice, if it could be called unique, something like that. That'll do it.
We tell you, thank you so much for being on Extraordinary Drummer Show.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored, and you're a great host, man. You got great questions and a great vibe. Thank you so much. Stay in touch with me, bro, and like, thank you for having me. That was fun. I'm in a great mood now.
I'm glad to hear that. Will you help us wave for goodbye to all the fans out there?
Thank you, everybody. Love you guys. See you. Okay, soon.
Well, in the midst of doing the Mike Clark interview, thereafter, so many weeks after, we learned that we lost our dear friend, his dear friend, Paul Jackson, the great bass player. So I invited Mike Clark back on the show. If you will, talk a little bit about his dear friend, Paul Jackson, and all the great music. I tell you, my favorite song was Actual Proof. What was it like with Paul, Mike?
Well, you know, we were best friends since about 1968. So way before Actual Proof, we had been playing together, and we even shared a house together for years and traveled together for most of our lives, actually. And he was an incredible, you couldn't have a better friend. We were beyond friends. We were something else. It was like, felt like we've been together lifetime after lifetime. And we had so much fun. Every day was, when we were young, every day was an adventure. This is way before Herbie. And we did a lot of crazy stuff together that young cats do, you know, like I'm not going to go into all that, but believe me, it was really crazy. And we wrote music together, and we had a million, this place that we had out in East Oakland was this house we shared was the epicenter for all of the musicians, and we had a music room with a B3 and drums and all of the stuff in it. And our girlfriends were over all the time. You know, it was a blast. We just had so much fun, and it was so creative. And I can't explain losing him. Is like there's a piece of my life missing that I can't even explain it, how deep our friendship was. But the good thing is, if there's got to be a good thing in this, is the night before he passed away, he called me and he said, and the last things we said to each other was, I love you. I said, I love you, Paul, forever. And he said, I love you. You know I do. And that was it, man.
Wow. Mike, let me say thank you. So I know you're pressed for time, my friend. Thank you so very much for coming back on the Extraordinary Drummer Show and talk about your dear friend, Paul Jackson, my friend.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And good to see you again, man. And be safe and happy. And I'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.